I did a little bit of updating on this talk last night. Hugo spoke yesterday about masculinity and trying to bring that down, and how it's important for men to actually stand up and talk a little bit about what they've been through, to own it, and to be more transparent. So initially I wasn't going to talk very much about myself, and actually because of one of the cancellations, I think we have a little bit more time this morning than we might otherwise have had, so I'm going to be self-indulgent and just talk a little bit more than the 20 minutes that I initially planned. So, this is me. Just, I want to repeat that content warning. It is difficult stuff, but it's incredibly important that we talk about it. We start off a little bit sad, okay? It's been a difficult year. It's been a difficult few years. But I promise that once we get over that initial bump, we will come to game development immediately following that. And it's a very positive message in the fullness of time, so please bear with me. The other thing I'll say is I've written fairly extensive and fairly literal notes because I find that if I give myself bullet points, I tend to meander and ramble far too much. So I'm going to be looking at the screen quite a lot. What I'll say is that from what I know of this community, we're amongst a very caring and supportive group, and troubling as this stuff is, needs to be discussed in the open. And the power of mental health problems is really kind of sapped away when we actually share and open up about it. And when that kind of isolation is broken, and that's what these communities are about. So if I have one message for you to take away from this talk today, it's that just share what's going on inside your head, basically. So with that little aside covered, I'll begin with my story. This presentation overall was extremely difficult to write. I found myself avoiding it. It was also pretty difficult to cut down to size, so hopefully I can get through it in fast enough. But there's a lot to say on this subject. I was initially going to talk just on statistics, some of the strategies. Changed my mind again yesterday, as I said. So I'm a cisgender white guy. My parents worked extremely hard to allow us the privilege of not really having to worry about money when I was younger. Part of the reason I think it's worth conveying this background is so I'm not just kind of sounding off about nothing. My mum took a career break when she had me, but my dad was committed to his work the whole way through. He reached the top of his field as an electrical engineer with a focus on design for instruments measuring pressure in air or water, other fluids, chief engineer at General Electric. And because it's an international company, he was often absent. So flying around the world, doing talks, maybe not so much public speaking, but internal stuff. And my therapist says that during this period, my locus of awareness was incorrectly placed. My dad was also prone to very serious stress and anxiety about anything from where to park the car to where we're going to eat or whether he'd get to watch his TV program in peace, etc. He was a great mind and he loved us, but he struggled with stuff that he didn't know how to unpack and how to talk about. So we ended up having to perform, this is my mum and I, a fair amount of kind of unseen work just to support him. And that locus of awareness I've learned since really should have been in myself. I should have been listening to how I was feeling. And that's something that I've really had to train. When I was 16, after my mum and I had moved out of the family home due to the deteriorating relationship, due in part to secrets my dad had kept, having then been discovered, to be kept from me in turn, my dad was found dead at home. I'll never know whether the combination of drugs in his system, which caused his death, was by design and a deliberate choice, or if he made a mistake. He didn't leave a note. But he did transfer, my mum found out, a decent amount of money into her name in the bank beforehand. So he also had excellent life insurance. The final lesson that my father taught me is something I think we all stand to learn from. In the time I knew him, he was gradually developing a kind of hypochondria. He was constantly worried about his blood pressure, his eyesight, this kind of stuff. But he didn't actually live to see those become real problems. He didn't live to enjoy the retirement with his wife and his son that he'd planned for his whole life, that he'd worked so hard to get together. He refused to seek therapy, saying that he was too old to change. And I realized since that actually, I think that was an excuse, because he was scared. His sister developed paranoid schizophrenia around the time my grandmother passed away, so he never really had anyone except my mum and a few friends and work colleagues to talk to. When the pain was too much, when things got too bad, we left, and in a matter of months he was gone. So, what's the lesson? Planning for the future is good, but not at the expense of the present. If you can't find purpose in what you're doing now, then you're placing bets which may not pay out. You can break that cycle with self-awareness and some of the other strategies, which I'll cover towards the end of the talk. That other lesson is opening up before you become unable to do so. So that's a lot. Thank you for listening to that. I have my traumas, and they're with me every single day. They have to do with fear, with complex stress, with death, and seeking self-confidence in the wake of it. Fighting them and fighting the instincts to fear, to stack everything up together, all of the worries, and kind of block out the sun with it, is almost a full-time job. But besides that, I'm coming to you guys now also freshly off the back of burnout from our previous game. I'll talk about that a little bit more towards the end. And hopefully we can all kind of share our experiences of getting that balance right. This is a great crew, like I said. So a big central message of this whole thing is not only about sharing your feelings for the clear benefits you get from doing so, but also for breaking the stigma around suffering and seeking help for mental health problems. I'm quite certain that every person in this room could tell me a story about themselves that would make me cry, right? And if you would like to do that, then buy me a drink or 2 or 5. It's quite easy to get me into a reflective mood if I'm still awake by this evening. So, let's get into the major content and talk a little bit about why mental health matters, particularly with regard to game development in this industry and the things that are special about what we do, the challenges that we face. So on a very materialistic and pragmatic basis to begin with, we'll come back around at the end for why it's important for you and I on a personal level. And we'll commence right out of the gate with some statistics, because everybody loves graphs, right? I'm going to try and move through these fairly rapidly, but you can look these up at your own pace if you'd like to. It's all publicly available, and I'll be putting my citations up at the end. So here are some of the findings from the International Game Developers Association's most recent Developer Satisfaction Survey in 2017. That's a mouthful. These graphs are nicely presented in the Take This 2019 white paper named State of the Industry 2019 on Mental Health, which I'll be citing a number of times, and I really recommend taking a look at that for more insights on the topic. One of the impressive statistics here is the first one in the top left, which says that 64% of surveyed developers, significantly more than half, have been in the industry fewer than 10 years. It's a relatively new industry, but a little bit of napkin maths can help us figure out that's still more than we would expect, I think. I also want to draw particular attention here to the stat in the bottom right-hand side. While 53% of respondents report crunch as an expected part of their job, only 18% actually reported receiving overtime compensation. I can vouch that as part of a micro-indie studio, as I'm sure many of you can relate to, both of those demographics do apply to me, but we aren't salaried workers either. So moving on to a similar issue in the vein of job stability, consistent work is also a huge issue in video games, as I'm sure you're all too aware. A lot of the world is increasingly running on a gig economy, relying on freelancers, short-term contracts, but the games industry is one of the places where that's the most visible. These other responses from the DSS show even more of the scale of the problem. You can see that there's a big majority here around 1 to 3 years, up to 4 to 6, at which point it drops off dramatically. We'll come on to the sheer revenues of this industry shortly, but the idea that nearly 50% of employed developers don't see themselves remaining in the same job beyond 4 to 6 years is something which I think would likely have frightened all of our career-minded parents. And these kinds of stresses contribute directly to mental health problems, which again feed back in to the work issues, and it's just this kind of cycle. From Take This again in 2019, changes in levels of job strain, control, psychological demands, and social support also impact one's risk of anxiety and depression. That's from Mark and Smith 2011, as well as Burnout, My Date, Crown, and Ibony of 2017. I am not qualified to speak at length about industry labor practices writ large. My only comment there is that I do recommend unionizing. Sabina pointed out very poignantly that unionizing game workers ought really to include everyone involved in the process, not just us well-off Westerners, but organizing ourselves is at least a step in the right direction. We need support networks for small and solo development houses because you need to have people around you who can relate to what you're going through. Putting the economics of job stability aside for a moment and taking a look at the more emotional side of things, the next quote from the Take This 2018 really struck me, and I think it gets to the core of some of the issues I'm getting at. I think everyone invests a lot in their work, but I think that game developers do so much. I think that game developers see being a game developer as their identity, and they're very attached to their projects, which can make issues at their job, such as poor development, poor reception of their work, really hit hard. I think that people in the game industry so often suffer from imposter syndrome. I just think that such a group of passionate people that are working on really complex art, when it comes down to it, there's a lot of chance to be hit by some hard blows. And I think that's a huge struggle. I can vouch for that. There's not a lot of talk generally about preparation for kind of unleashing your art on the unsuspecting world. It's virtually impossible to prepare for. When this thing you've been able to mold in your own little world and share with a select set of peers ends up out there for public consumption, it can be extremely overwhelming, especially if you've not done your quality assurance. So what can all that lead to? Yep, that's right. Mental health consequences, and that's bad for developers, and that's bad for development businesses. There are substantial challenges in this sector. These studies, especially the Take This white paper, cite a number of major factors overall. So we've got lack of job stability, lack of diversity and inclusion, isolation for freelancers or remote workers, common ethos of overwork, games as escapism, effort-reward imbalance, public perception of developers and products, high visibility, and vulnerability to public backlash for mistakes or design choices. I think we're all guilty of actually doing that as well, particularly the bigger companies. Depression is the #1 cause of disability worldwide. So not only does it impact you individually, but companies are impacted by their employees' inability to work. So the bottom line gets threatened too if we don't take the time to address these things. It's important to note as well that depression isn't just something which happens to you like being sleepy in the afternoon. It's serious, it deserves to be taken seriously, and it seriously impacts your life. If you suffer from depression, please don't downplay it. You deserve help, and it's not something you should have to put up with. We'll be coming back to that towards the end of the talk. So, wait, what does work? What do we like about this gig? It'd be easy to think that the whole industry should be avoided, possibly even set on fire, based on some of the statistics we've just discussed. They are damning, but the things that this sector offers, which are hard to find anywhere else, at least while we're still getting paid. So without reading out this whole piece, because I don't want to dwell too long on these figures, in 2018, video games as a whole surpassed the film industry in total revenue, according to this report, which was published in TechCrunch. That's pretty incredible to me. It speaks to the power of the sector and the demand for the products. So if that stuff isn't coming down the chain, there's a problem. We're also seeing incredible growth. So just diving over this one quickly as well, that represents a year-on-year growth for the worldwide industry of 18% from 2017. Obviously, a huge amount of this is AAA. We've got to get our piece of that big old pie in the indie scene as well. So what else? Where else can you find the sheer variety and union of diverse creative disciplines and individuals? Where else can you tell these kinds of stories? What other medium can you reach people as deeply as you can in games? Video games are a magnet for creatives and dreamers of all stripes, and it's no surprise. I think a lot of us are here because we've been touched by games that we've played in the past and then ended up making them ourselves. These, I think, are some of the reasons that pulled us all in, some of the reasons why we're still here despite the challenges, and that leads me on to my next point, and this is a big one. If there's homework for this session, this is it. I think I've actually put another slide in the middle, so I'll come back to that. I thought I'd insert a little bit of light relief at this point while we're going over statistics again. From the IGDA DSS 2017, the typical freelancer in this sample was 33 years old identified as white or mixed racial with white, 69%, nice, and male, 55%, and worked in the United States, that's 34%. He was 70% heterosexual, slightly more likely to be single than married, but he probably did not have children at 81%. He did not report a disability at 72%, and was likely to have a university degree in 41%, in computer science 18%, or game design 13%. That does mean as well that if you don't have a degree in game design or computer science, that's not a barrier, so don't worry about it. You're good. I thought this was fun because that individual may in fact be in the room with us today. I don't know. Does that describe you? Are you 47% single? I think my number might be a little bit higher than that. So anyway, this in my opinion and my learning is one of the most crucial things you can spend your time on. I sort of think of this as the meta game of what the work we do day to day, week to week. This is why we do what we do, and it's different for everybody. It's very important that we talk about development, nourishment, critical examination of personal values and goals. But seriously though, why are you here? The thing is, there's a reason why you want to work in games. There's a reason why you work with the skills you do. For me, it's because I always enjoyed the fact that games can take us to places we can't otherwise visit. They can make us feel and experience things we might not otherwise be able to feel and experience. I work in music and audio because I've always found myself to be most moved by the music in an area. The original Unreal is a great example of this for me. Maybe it's just the way my brain's wired, but I love being able to create that. So I'm in it for the art. I'm privileged to be able to say that. Let me be absolutely clear. People who take a salaried job instead of deciding, like all of us lunatics here, to remain independent deserve respect. People who quote unquote sell out, provided it's not malicious or damaging to other people in service of making a living, also deserve respect. We're not here to judge anybody's choices. What I am advocating is understanding the why of those choices for yourself, to find your principles and the things you value so that you can better value yourself. For me, writing music, playing along to music, it's part of my self-care. When I'm feeling at my absolute worst, I switch on the synth. That does have complications when I need to produce something for an external deadline. Sometimes I'm not in the mood, but that's part of it. That's part of the work too. So what about you? Are you in it for the art as well? I'll tell you this much for nothing. If you don't enjoy what you do, that's not ideal. In the development sphere, there are times when you have to be driven by a need or a desire to do the work, not by the rewards. Paratopic had a budget of nothing. We made it because we wanted to make it for its own sake. There might have been other easier ways to make money. I don't know, selling watches on the street. The fact is that it was successful, but I don't know, that wasn't initially part of the plan. Jess and Doc wanted to pay rent and craft something interesting at the same time. I wanted to score a game, and it happened the way it happened. So, are you here by choice? You may end up working on projects that don't ultimately serve your interests if you don't know what it is that you want. Now, encouragingly, mostly everything that I've seen from the talk so far, this is a passionate group of people. So I don't think you necessarily are in much risk of just losing yourself to this. But you have to figure it out. You have to figure it out. If you don't know, try not to make big commitments until you do know. Are you here because you fell into this job or you couldn't think of what else to do? I doubt it. I mean, having spoken to some of you besides, I'm almost certain that's not it. So are you here because you've made a conscious and deliberate choice? Are you aware of the consequences even as they're happening? Have you audited the paths not taken? You might think so, but it's extremely nuanced and insidious how this type of work can affect your lifestyle, the isolation and stuff that can come with it. Again, I'm not here to preach to you about how to run your career. I only ask you to consider, how does the work you do factor into what you want from your life? I just want to give that a moment to sit, and I'll come back to it later. A lot of this talk is quite dense, but just pausing on that thought for a few seconds. How does the work you do factor into what you want from your life? The next couple of slides are less for the veterans and more for those of you who might be newer to the sector, working on your first game, or wanting to take a plunge. I am not trying to talk you out of it. It might sound like I am, but how does it serve you? Have you considered ideas change during development? Your story might not come out the way you want it to. Are you still going to be satisfied with simply having produced quality content, even if it isn't what you planned? Does the project exist to tell a specific story? Does it serve a greater purpose in your life? Find your goals, and then keep them central in everything you do, and only compromise in favor of those values when you have the chance. Even if you don't know what they are yet, but you know that you want to work hard, that's healthy too. Be ready, though, to receive those bigger desires if and when they come along. Living creatures are entities which defy entropy. That's almost how we can be defined as different from rocks and metals and inert matter. We defy entropy. We take in energy, we activate it and direct it to prevent the constituent atoms and molecules which we're made of from flying apart and returning to the lowest possible energy state. The same is true of our communities. These constituent elements can change, but the only person who can discover and apply where that energy will be focused and why is you. It's a lot of pressure, but unfortunately nobody else can or should decide on your behalf. You need to know it. You don't want to find yourself looking back in a year, 3 years, 10 years' time, realizing that you didn't get the satisfaction you wanted from the projects you chose. If you know where it fits in your values, and you know what makes you feel valued and valuable, then that will guide you to the right path. Earlier this year, I met someone who worked in games for a good long time, but when very serious illness, and actually eventually death, struck someone in his family, he took all of the awards that he'd won, and he threw them in the trash. Because that was never what it was about, and he had to reassess everything. That had never been the goal. And this is the most important part of the presentation. I'm going to repeat it one more time. How does this work factor into what you want out of your life? If you don't figure it out, who can predict whether you'll be satisfied? It's impossible if you don't know what satisfaction means to you. So coming into the final segment here, we're going to look at some coping strategies, which are even more effective if you know why you're trying to reach the apex of this particular hill. Of course, these are not one size fits all. Really just an overview of some of the lessons I've learned myself. So don't feel you have to hit any of these, or that you're not doing mental health right. If you don't follow them, they're not rules, they're just thoughts and ideas. So we're coming back down now. We're back in the fairly conventional slide design zone. So once you're actually in the work, because presumably most or many of you are already, whether or not you've done the exercise and hard work of figuring out why, you're going to need to keep yourself afloat and work capable on a day-to-day basis. For me, this breaks down into 3 broad categories: openness, self-reflection and self-care, and considerations within the development process itself. So in many ways, this is the easiest and the most important aspect of the 3. This is probably as close to a rule as any of these get. Openness. Ultimately, if you are open and proactively honest with the people around you, not only will they understand you better, but they'll also be able to provide you with advice, help you out of the tight spots when things get tough. Everybody wants to help, because then we help each other back and forth. So we've got a few options here for who to talk to. Family. Family can be a great option if you have a good relationship with someone you're related to. On the other hand, they can feel put on the spot. They can feel responsible in some way. They can have their own baggage, which makes it more difficult or hard for them to see your experience more clearly. And they can be too close to the issue. So it can be difficult for them to help you. You've got your peers and your co-workers. For work-related issues, this can be the best option or the worst option. Anxiety can often be connected to worrying about what people say behind your back, so sometimes a third party might be better. There's exceptions here. Workload, dedicated human resources, dedicated counselors. These are resources that larger studios often have built into the structure, but actually a lot of us don't really have access to. So, friends. Friends may or may not relate to your problems. Plenty of people can't relate to a period of pronounced mental anguish. I suspect the number's smaller than you might think, but there are people out there who just haven't been through that stuff. You say you were stuck in the house for 3 months, why didn't you call? We could have gone out clubbing. Maybe you should have joined a gym. Go running, get out in the sunshine. it doesn't always work like that. The fact is, if you've tried reaching out to people and they haven't understood, that doesn't make your experience invalid. Yeah, I'm going to repeat that for the people at the back. If you've tried reaching out to people in your life and they don't get it, that doesn't invalidate your experience. So keep trying. If you can't get good emotional support from people, consider that our friends and loved ones tend to love being given practical, logistical, actionable things they can do to help, especially if they're in a position to do something for you which nobody else can. That's like making phone calls, sending emails, whatever. Give them a job. They might find that easier. So the final option, professional therapies. If you have access to this service, please consider trying it. If you're already in therapy, great. I don't need to tell you how good it is and the benefits that it can give to your life. If you don't have access, the UK has it kind of bad. Mental health is drastically underfunded over there, but we have a public health system and there are some free options. The USA has it worse. My God, I mean, there are virtually no free options. People are left to fend for themselves. Socialized healthcare, in my opinion, is a risk pool that we pay into because you never know when you're going to fall sick. It's that veil of ignorance thing. Countries that don't have that just boggle my mind. But anyway, so whatever the case, be open. Speaking will help you understand your own mind, and I can vouch for that. So self-care and reflection, that's the second batch of stuff. Your internal world. When you lie down to go to sleep at night, or for some of us, the middle of the day, it's still just who's there in your head, and that's that mind that you have to cope with. Self-care is different for everybody. It's something you have to learn and train like a muscle. It kind of links back to what I was saying about the work on the values and goals. But you also need to listen to your body. This one's quite difficult. It means taking a moment when you feel yourself getting caught up, examining exactly what it is you're feeling. Often it's a combination of things, and for me it often links to the past and things that I've rationally explored and put to bed, but which regardless insist on kind of piercing through to the present and messing things up and muddying up my feelings. Sometimes the same stuff will come up in series over and over again and for different things. But, you know, my therapist and basically everyone who's thought seriously about this area says there's patterns to this stuff. And learning about those, how your cycle kind of functions, is a massive help. We also have journaling. This is just a really good practice. Logging how you feel day by day, especially if you include details about what set you back, and even more importantly, what went right, can be really invaluable for the process and figuring out the mysteries in your own head. So I've actually used an application called Optimism, which unfortunately doesn't seem to be available for download anymore. What's great about it is it allows you to customize custom fields for triggers, stay well strategies, symptoms, as well as keeping track of your self-reported sleep, mood, exercise. You can attach notes to every day, analyze the data with charts and graphs. It's free software for Windows. I actually have a copy of it on my USB drive if anyone would like it. Hopefully you don't get all of my diaries with it as well. Failing at all like that, consider looking up James Penbaker for his take on therapeutic journaling. So, game development. The final portion here is about the strategies which apply specifically to video game development. First up, and it's in bold because, my God, it is massive. Scope management. Again, this one isn't something I'm qualified or interested in preaching about to people who've been at this longer than I have, which is a lot of people actually, but for everyone else, we all want to do big and impressive and ambitious projects. The thing is, if you overreach, you really suffer for it, especially when you've got publisher deadlines looming, but even if it's just you, you can end up feeling worse about it if you can't meet your own deadlines, and this cuts both ways. Think extremely carefully and realistically about, in pre-production, about the time things are going to take, and know the aspects that you can actually cut for time, if necessary. Minimum viable product. Secondly, though, also be willing to give yourself a break, figuratively speaking, if you're not getting everything done that you wanted to do. It's not a failure. Failure only happens when you give up, and even that's not a bad thing, because you learn by failing. You learn by doing, and not by completing. Don't kick yourself. Give yourself more time if you can. Be honest, and keep communication up with your colleagues and creditors at all times. I'd like to say thank you to Humble, because we published our last game on Humble, and they gave us an advance, but seemingly were pretty hands-off, and we delayed it like 4, 5, 6 times or something, and they're just like, yeah, sure, take some extra time. We want it to be a good product, so ask. Just ask. They're human too. Speaking of which, mentorship. This is something I'm actually feeling a profound lack of in my own life. I think it's something we all deserve. Scoping a game sounds easy, but once you get to staring at a blank design document, it can be extremely daunting. If you don't have the experience, then what can you do? We need to figure out better systems of reaching out to colleagues, even competitors, for help and advice. Colleagues supporting colleagues. This is the perfect place for it. Give those cards out. Fire off cold emails. Talk to the people you admire. They are desperately, dreadfully, awfully human, just like you. For companies as a whole, and for you personally, agree on working practices and hold yourself to them. This includes things like allowable work hours, productivity, recompense, etc. And altogether, those can begin to form your company's values and goals, the same way that you have your own. In the planning stage, you need to allow enough time for contractors to get their hours in. Keep them in the loop as early as you can. And this has the added benefit of getting them excited about a project as well. So this is kind of trite advice for everyone. I feel like a hypocrite, given Mariano was right. The Americano I had at 9 last night was a bad idea. I am a tired boy. I am a chronic insomniac as well. But get enough sleep, for crying out loud. Set a bedtime. Inspiration strikes at weird times, but it's only as useful as the amount of fuel that you still have in the tank. If you work solo, find other solo developers who can relate. Here, today, there's loads of them. Share your stuff, take an interest in other people's projects, and get inspired. Speaking of other developers, please forgive me my really goofy clip art. I just couldn't help myself. But employ diverse teams. It's actually really easy, because there are so many talented people out there, and they deserve love and support. I was so anxious and feeling weird after we shipped our second game, Roman Sands. But the feeling which kept coming up and overpowering the strangeness was actually this love for all of the amazing people I'd had the opportunity to work with on that project. We had a lot of fantastic contractors, some just doing little jobs, some pulling awesome workloads. Cass, Medea, Root Moyashi, Violet, Emily, you guys, awesome. You killed it. And they enriched it so much. I'm deeply privileged to have had these people around. And hey, know what that means? You're not alone. Breaking a stigma requires talking about it openly. In a happy coincidence, that's also a fundamental part of the process of healing and growth. Win-win. From what I've seen of the little group here, it's a great crowd. Entering into the indie development community has given me a lot of warm, fuzzy feelings. We could use more direct and concrete mentorship, but if you find yourself without people to talk to about the emotional and difficult parts of the job, try joining some discords and lurking. Eventually you'll see someone voice a feeling that you relate to, and hopefully you'll find the courage to reach out. Lifelong friendships are made that way. And try not to be scared to be open. Each time you wear your heart on your sleeve, it makes it a little bit easier the next time. It makes a better environment for us all to exist in. So that's pretty much it. That was a lot. Thank you for sticking with me through the tough parts. Again, I just want to reinforce one more time. I'm just a guy talking about very complex and nuanced set of issues. This isn't gospel. Unfortunately, as I said, the responsibility for your own mental wellness rests primarily with you. The message is, though, that others can help, and it's not hopeless. So in the last few moments here, I'd like to just slow down and drop a little bit of a palate cleanser. It's a passage I love a lot from Lord Alfred Tennyson's sort of, 28,000 word poem In Memoriam, which he wrote over the course of 17 years after the death of his friend who was away in Paris. I think it's relevant to the theme of the festival, elements of change. It's food for thought as we get wrapped up in all of the kind of complex details of our little lives. Context is everything. And the world and the universe is much vaster and actually much stranger than we tend to feel. There rolls the deep, where grew the tree. O earth, what changes hast thou seen? There where the long street roars hath been the stillness of the central sea. The hills are shadows, and they flow from form to form, and nothing stands. They melt like mist, the solid lands. Like clouds, they shape themselves and go. And with that, so shall I. Thank you very much.